Agents, how many times have you come across the all red build versus survivability argument in the Division 2? Likely a lot. Is it possible the community is divided because both sides are right? Allow me to ask the question this way. How much armor would you need to play out of cover without a shield? 1.1 million? How about 2.2 million? Could you run and gun, face off with a heroic elite, and come out on top? Let's say you can. But on you now are 5 of his friends with 50 million in combined armor you have to chew through. And they each hit harder than you do, at least 8 times harder than you. You're out-armored and outgunned. Coding around extra armor doesn't get you that far in this game. For every 1 million in armor, you get a few milliseconds of added survivability at best. In this video, we're going to dive into survivability a little deeper. I'll be walking you through some of the best build iterations in the game as we explore how to balance self-sustainability with time to kill using build synergy. And when these are in harmony, the build brings tremendous amounts of survivability. In the end, you'll have 9 amazing build templates you can select from. Let's do this. A couple of quick housekeeping things before we get started. We have 9 amazing builds to get through, so I'll be going through them quite quickly. Don't worry, I'll be providing high-level views of each build at least 3 times throughout the video. I will also recap all of the builds at the end of the vid. Run and gun builds are the ultimate test of survivability, so that's what we will use. They need a fast time to kill and a fast rate of recovery to survive in close quarter combat, and all of these will be using SMGs. Build 1 has a special purpose. We're going to use this to set the upper limit of the damage threshold for the rest of the builds to follow. To do that, we're going to use a top tier, all red classic crit damage build. The build is using Sokolov, Walker, and Grupo brand sets and have crit chance and crit damage everywhere. The talents are Obliterate and Unstoppable Force. I also use 2 pieces of improvised gear to add more crit damage to the build. To keep it straightforward, I'm not using any exotics. It's equipped with the Dark Winter for speed, and that added 50% crit damage on kill. The Gunner specialization is giving us 10% armor on kill and ammo regen. We have 260% crit damage when Perfect Killer is procced on the gun. We're not focused on the skills for this build, but I have a Fixer and a Banshee Pulse. Actually, this build can take any sort of hits out of cover, so I'm going to switch that Banshee Pulse for the shield here. And that shield doesn't last long when you don't have any armor, right? Now, we're not going to worry about damage numbers per se, we're going to focus on how fast time to kill feels. If we get overly focused on the numbers, we lose sight on whether we can actually perceive the difference in the time to kill when we're in the field. It is possible to have diminishing returns on damage. That's why I prefer to test all my builds in the field. Between the builds we will be exploring, there will be differences between time to kill as we bring in self-sustainability. So we will evaluate that along the way, then ask ourselves, is the juice worth the squeeze? So you've heard me say self-sustainability a few times now. A self-sustaining build has the capacity to endure damage in a relatively ongoing way, with a suitable rate of recovery to be able to get back into the fight quickly. And in our case, running and gunning out of cover without a shield. For the sake of this video, we're defining survivability as having self-sustainability and time to kill, both at speeds suitable for running and gunning. For time to kill, we'll set par at 1 clip per enemy on average. And this build is not capable of enduring any kind of damage. Now it can surely deal it, that's because all of the build synergy has been dedicated towards outbound weapon damage. You can tell it's out of balance because it can't withstand any kind of inbound damage. A lot of time I'm taking hits from NPCs out of my line of sight or from a distance. That makes it hard to cross the terrain with this all red build. For run and gun builds, it's not reasonable to expect no damage. On the contrary, we must brace for constant damage. Not even the shield on this build can handle much, but there's no way I can run without it. Now, in build videos, we've all seen NPCs line up for a shot in the head then fall like dominoes, but for all red builds, those moments are not the true test of a build. The true test of an all red run and gun build is whether it can simply cross the terrain without losing all its armor. I mean, we only have 4 armor kits, right? If you have to use one every time you go from A to B, you're not running a sustainable build. In close quarter combat, it's about recovery rates and time to kill. If you don't have both, you don't really have a good build for this type of fight. I'm a running gunner. I like playing out of cover. That's my thing. And I'll tell you, this build fails the survivability test flat out. High damage output alone is not enough to call the build powerful. You'd have to get a jump on the enemy every time, and in a vacuum where there isn't another in your blind spot. But it did the job it was supposed to. It set the high end of the time to kill for build comparison. Let's add self-sustainability. Now there are a few ways to do that. Build 2 brings us massive amounts of armor regen. I'm bringing in the exotic Ridgeway's Pride chest piece to give us up to 48% armor regen per second, depending on how many enemies are bleeding in range. We're using Bellstone for another 1% armor regen, and we have Wicked for damage, which is activated with the bleed status effect from the chest piece. We're still using the Vector, but now we have Sadist, which is better than Perfect Killer because it doesn't time out, which is a constant issue with the Dark Winter that no one actually likes to talk about. The 2 pieces of Golan and Empress Guard knee pads are giving us another 2% regen combined. I've rolled crits everywhere. All this synergizes to give us survivability from sustainable armor regen and a fast time to kill. To run and gun, you need big chunks of armor to come back quickly. You're taking heat and you need to be ready for the next better up. So the only way to do that with an armor regen build is to run a ton of armor. We have about 1.7 million on this. Taking Ridgeway's Pride into account, this build has an impressive 881,000 armor per second coming in at full tilt. It idles at 59,000 per second. And we need that to endure incoming damage taken from enemies at range. This is how we can cross the terrain without relying on the shield. So as I test this build, pay attention to my armor bar. How often does my armor break, and how fast is my recovery? Can I go toe to toe with more than one enemy out of cover? These are all the questions we need to ask ourselves when we're creating builds with high survivability. Because of the chest piece, it's best to spread your clip out to all the enemies within 15 meters before you pick them off one at a time. That makes it a little tough to measure the time to kill, but it feels fast enough to say it's impressive. I mean, I'm running 1.7 million armor and I melted the named boss, right? A quick note, come over and join us over at my Discord. If you want to play the Division 2, but in new and exciting ways, then that's the place to be. See you there. This build is legit cool, but I like to go fast, and I find that armor regen builds have a tough time keeping up with my pace, especially with this control point. The enemies are so spread out, it's hard to get that armor regen rate maxed out more often than not. Also, because Ridgeway's Pride does so much, we're actually killing off our source of power, right? We're killing off the enemy who's giving us regen. And sometimes 2 to 3 seconds to full armor is too long. Sometimes we need our armor back instantly. Okay, I must say up front that build 3 is insane. Not only does it have insane damage output, but it brings in almost all of the armor on kill the Division 2 has to offer. We're getting 10% from Bellstone, 10% from the Death Grip gloves, 15% from our 2 pieces of system corruption, 10% from the gunner specialization, and then 24% from perfect preservation, which we have on our Emmeline's Guard SMG when we kill with a headshot. 12% if not. So that totals in at 69% armor on kill. Just like the armor regen build, you want enough armor to make that worth it. For comparison's sake, I kept the build at 5 armor cores and 2 weapon damage cores. This gives us almost 1.2 million armor on kill. That's just insane. Insane. I'm also using the memento for bonus armor between kills and to help cross the terrain. The added red core and weapon damage boosts from the buffs don't hurt either. You can also get more armor on kill with your mods, but we'd lose too much damage output if we did that. I don't suggest doing that. It's not worth a little bit. Also, you could also go with the Coyote's Mask if you preferred more crit damage. For this build, we want to evaluate, can we kill when we need it? Also, how do we do at crossing terrain when the enemy is out of range for our SMG and we can't kill to live? These are factors to think about. The skills help here a bit. I prefer the Defender drone. You could also run the Firewall specialization for the shield and get even more damage. It also helps between kills too, but speed is king, so I'm always weary about adding that to my build. So build 3 is OP. You have a lot of room to drop down the armor or armor on kill. With 69% armor on kill, you could go all the way down to 1.1 or 1.3 million armor and still feel awesome. You just want to be able to take some heat between kills, so remember that. That's the thing with armor on kill focused builds. What happens when you face a bunch of tanky NPCs, a named boss, rogues, or legendary rated enemies? Remember, all that armor is not giving us much survivability without the armor on kill. So, if our time to kill goes way up due to the circumstances, we really get in a pickle. Build 4 brings us a different type of self-sustainability in the form of an invisible shield of sorts. This build is about bonus armor. Bonus armor gives you more confidence when out of cover, plus it allows us to use Intimidate, which is one of the strongest chest talents for close range. I've dropped the armor a lot because we're going to rely on that bonus armor refreshing when we need it. Now I'm running the named Walker backpack for perfect adrenaline rush. Again, you could also run the memento backpack here for bonus armor too. I think Adrenaline Rush is best here because it scales to the number of enemies without requiring a kill, and it refreshes every few seconds. Between the SMG and Gunner, we have 22 to 34% armor on kill too, so that's going to give us that survivability, or sustainability I should say. The stats are impressive on this one. We're running about 1.3 million armor and we have 216% crit damage. Adrenaline Rush is the way to go. I like how it tells me when there is an enemy in range. Bonus armor is a very powerful thing in this game. It alone is a shield. The downside is that it requires a kill or you to be within a distance to proc it, and sometimes the enemies are at range. And without heals or regen, you don't have anything getting your base armor back up to full since your SMG can't kill at range easily. Now, if you use the memento, you'd have the regen and repair skills buff, but it's a tough trade-off because the more your bonus armor is up, the more Intimidate is up too, and sometimes memento it times out on you when you're looking for that Intimidate. Adrenaline Rush works nicely here, and the time to kill is fantastic. Build 5 is going to bring a twist, something that doesn't come to mind for most when they're thinking about survivability, and that is speed. Not just movement speed, but I mean RPM. Something I have recently reacquainted myself with is the exotic SMG, the Chatterbox. In this build, we reach over 1600 RPM. Whoa, right? That's with the help of Striker. We're using this gear set because of the 15% RPM it gives us. The SMG is also saving us from reload, helping us chain kill easier. Otherwise, it has high armor and crits. The Coyote Mask gives us a 25% crit damage boost we just about almost always use. And ladies and gents, we bring you the Devil's Due backpack. The Talent Perfect Clutch synergizes nicely with high RPM crit builds. A lot of people are sleeping on this backpack. I'm going to show you why you need to use this right now. It's a two-part talent, and they're independent of each other, which most don't realize. One keeps your armor over 20% by critting, helpful always in a run and gun build. The other part gives you armor on kill over 4 to 10 seconds depending on how many red cores you have. Now, you have a good amount of armor. You can get more out of this by dropping that down some, but I think we're at the sweet spot. By the way, we're running somewhere north of 200% crit damage on this, and that's not to be trifled with at this RPM, so this is going to be fun. Watch that armor bar as we're critting and killing on the enemies. Clutch is at work, folks. Extremely helpful. See how the build scales to the threat level? The RPM gets very fast, and the reloads are basically non-existent. This SMG is very underrated. Now this build is a bit different in that time to kill improves the more enemies that are near us, so I guess you'd have to average that out in your mind. But for me, this feels like it has one of the best time to kill averages overall. What's also cool about Clutch is that distance isn't a factor. As long as you crit, you heal. Okay, so that was a beautiful build. I hope you try it. I also just did a Chatterbox build for the Division 2 Mission Impossible Weekly Challenge. You should check that out as well. It's a face tank Chatterbox build you must see. So there we have build 5. Build 6 is going to bring skill heals into the picture, something we haven't really seen in builds 1 through 5. Something else that is new is the armor level. I'm dropping it down to 1.3 million. My theory is that as long as we have a minimum of 1.1 to 1.3 million to take a punch, Fast regeneration is more important than the level of armor you have. Remember, all that armor is buying us milliseconds of survivability. It's the rate of recovery that matters, right? This is an important thing, don't miss this concept. Basically, this build has repair skills and crits everywhere. On the backpack I have memento for another 50% repair skills between the added skill tier and buffs from the trophies. The weapon talent I'm going with is reformation for 30% skill repairs boost. You can keep this refreshed constantly. Running technician is going to give you that 5th skill tier. It's also going to give you the artificer hive. I'm using it to buff my skill by 60%. This is also going to make it last longer. After this, reformation and a 20% incoming repairs from the mask, we're getting somewhere north of 160,000 heals per second just from our drone. Build 6 is fantastic because it's always steady feeding you those heals and you don't need a kill or anyone bleeding. Also, very helpful for team play. Build 7 is going to give us something none of the other builds were able to give, the ability to take a punch. What I mean is that this build is going to focus more on diminishing the impact of the hit over recovering from it. You still need recovery, and for that we'll be using armor on kill from gunner specialization and a little repair from our drone. Otherwise we'll be speccing on protection from elites onto every piece as well as crits. We'll be using the bonus armor to minimize damage also. Then add Intimidate for extra oomph. We're back to the Dark Winter, so our crit damage in the end will be at about 205% on kill. We're weighing in at 75% protection from elites, almost max. Now, what I want you to notice, just like build 6, we're dropping our armor to minimum suggested level for run and gun builds, 1.1 million. The idea here is that if we can marginalize the enemy's damage, we don't need as much armor for it. Non-elites are not as threatening, so we're not as concerned about them. Build 7 brings us full circle to the original point. You're wearing too much armor. Now in some cases, for the build to synergize with the talent or attribute, such as armor on kill, a healthy amount of armor is suitable. And armor regen builds can have their place in run and gun builds, but typically they don't heal fast enough, so we compensate that by putting on a ton of armor. If you were playing more relaxed behind cover, you wouldn't need as much, but as we can see here, we are taking damage from all directions, all the time. We need that Invisishield to protect our 6 from enemy fire. Bonus armor doesn't protect us much from damage from range. With this build, we're protected well, and it shreds. Together, that means our survivability is very high. So build 8 is a run-of-the-mill Hunter's Fury build without a shield of course. I'm putting crits everywhere, equipping the memento and the Intimidate talent on our chest. We're pairing it up with the Dark Winter for the added crit damage. By now, most are familiar with this gear set. It has been one of the best of the devs have given us. It's very balanced. Specifically, it gives us 20% armor on kill, then it gives us 45% amplified damage, 20% for enemies being in range, the rest stacking from kills. Gunner gives us 10% more armor on kill, and Memento fills in the gaps everywhere else. The Survivability build series would not be complete without this gear set, I must say. Now, this thing is going to shred hard. The biggest reason why is that the Intimidate talent amplified damage on top of the 45% the set is giving us already is a ton. Now, there's the trophies and perfect killer happening also. A lot is going on with this build. The most important is that everything is working in harmony. It needs a little armor for the armor on kill and to take some heat as we tug along. Otherwise, it's a great build. You don't need a shield, you just need to shake and bake, baby. Okay, finally for build 9, we're going to do something completely different. I'm going to build this for you on the fly. Basically what I'm doing is bringing parts of builds 1 through 7 into a single build, a Frankenstein experiment. It's going to work because it will have a balance of sustainability and time to kill for great survivability. I will be using the memento backpack for all the right reasons, including bonus armor, damage boost, regen, and skill power. I'll be spreading skill repair, regen, crits, and protection from elites across the build. We'll keep our armor at about 1.1 million, leaving us at a 3-2-3 core attribute ratio. I equipped the chatterbox for that threat scalability, and we will end up with 63 protection from elites after all is said and done. Alright, and here's our first customers. Although this is a Frankenstein build, I've actually run a ton of builds similar to this in the past. Of course I can run an all red build, but for running gunning or for clearing control points really fast, I've just found that builds with survivability are just more fun. And that's the point. That's the bottom line. These builds are just more fun than the red builds where you're literally stuck behind cover or a giant shield. Now, if you're not an aggressive player and you like to be behind cover and play a little bit deeper, you're a more relaxed player and you're just not going to agree with me. And I get that, I really do. I love my sniper build, for example. And I do adjust my gameplay for the circumstance, right? So when I'm in Legendary and I'm playing with the team, even if I have a build that allows me to get out of cover, if I have a high protection from elites build, for example, I still kick back and stay with my team. Because if you get way out there, just because you have a lot of survivability doesn't mean you can't die. And when you do, your team can't get to you. And that means they're a man down and you're sort of just a big disappointment. So you gotta stick with your team. That's really important. That's also survivability, right? Okay, here's a recap of all the builds that we ran through. Now, one of the questions I often get with basically every build video is, will these work for Legendary? Will these work for group play? The answer is, of course they will. And what I mean by that is that they're build templates. So there might be a thing or two that you have to tweak if you want to take it into a Legendary group play situation, for example. One thing you might look at is, do I want to run an SMG like the Dark Winter where it requires a kill to get that bonus? Many of you are not going to like that I say this, but the Dark Winter is horrible for Legendary, and that's because it has a 10-second timer on that. And chain killing in Legendary missions is actually difficult to do. Not so much because the enemies are tanky, which they are, but because they're bouncing around like little rubber bouncy balls. They're everywhere, they're fast, right? And that SMG just doesn't have the range or the power to take them out quickly. And that's why these are templates, so you can change something like the weapon to the chameleon or something that might be more suitable. And that's what I'm doing here, folks. I'm not giving you fish, I'm giving you a fishing pole. I'm hoping that even if you're a veteran player with 3 or 5,000 shade level watch, whatever, that there's something from this video that you learned that's new, maybe a different perspective. Agents, if you're into survivability, here's 2 more videos you have to watch right now. Tux out.